horrible, and I mean horrible news today for my fantasy football team. We'll go through all the updates. I'll update the rankings on the site. But yes, you can see that now, sadly, your boy has to pick up Matthew Stafford to play him off the waiver wire. We're already down Najee versus Jalen Warren. And sadly, we have to take Devonta Smith out of the lineup to play Jalen Waddle. We have no Chase. We have no Smith. We have no Purdy. We have no Kincaid. This is going to be an absolute brutal freaking week. Let's go through it one by one. So Bateman doesn't practice on Friday. Don't freaking care. Maybe, finally, maybe, I don't know. You could see something from Deontay Johnson. More likely, you're not going to have it. Josh Reynolds listed out for week 12. Does not matter. Ladd McConkey gets in a limited practice on Friday. I am operating under the assumption that Ladd's going to be good to go. And here's what freaking screws me. No Brock Purdy for week 12. So let's go ahead and let's update the rankings. We'll stick with the week 12 rankings. I'll update the rest of the season rankings off the live stream, but that's going to be a little bit more nuanced. So obviously we are going to go ahead. We're going to drop Brock Purdy to the very bottom of the QB ranks. We are going to be dropping CMC just a bit. Because at this point, you do have to lower expectations pretty dramatically here for this offense in San Francisco. Now, of course, you may make the argument, well, Mason, no Brock Purdy means they're going to run the ball. Mason, no Brock Purdy means CMC is going to be absolutely everything. If you look at the spread on this game, right now, you actually have a spread of 8 points where the Packers are favored. The Niners offense has an implied team total of 19 and a half points. The only offenses that sportsbooks are currently projecting to be worse than the Niners this week are the Giants, the Bears, the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Titans. They projected the Browns to be worse, and the Carolina Panthers. So I have to move CMC down just a bit. I think I would have CMC down to about RB4 in the way. Honestly, it doesn't freaking matter with McCaffrey, right? You're still starting to do it regardless. Where it really hurts and where you really have to make adjustments is if we are going to be looking at the receivers here. Previously, we had Debo about wide receiver 22 and Juwan Jennings about wide receiver 24. To be completely honest with you, I think I move these guys down dramatically. I mean, at this point, I think I would probably play Tank Dell over Juwan Jennings. And looking at Debo Samuel, I would for sure play Josh Downs. I'd for sure play Calvin Ridley. I think he played maybe DJ Moore, Jacoby Myers as well. I think Debo Samuel and Juwan Jennings both move to a range where I could very easily see either guy having a decent performance. But it's a rush-first offense in a bad matchup that projects to be one of the worst offenses in the league. So not super excited about Debo, not super excited about Jennings. Kittle does have to fall here as well. I still put Kittle up there in the Mount Rushmore of tight ends, but I think you move him down to 4 at the very least. But that's not it for all the news that we have today as well. Like I said, freaking sucks. So Brandon Cooks list is questionable for week 12. Doesn't matter. You don't start Brandon Cooks. You don't start Jalen Tolbert. You start CeeDee Lamb. Nobody else in the offense. You don't think anything else of it. Jake Ferguson listed as out for week 12. Let me just triple check to make sure that we have Ferguson at the very bottom of the ranks. Yep, we already do, knowing that Ferguson will be missing. Devonta Smith listed out for week 12. So we have to, move Dallas Goedert up. I think we had moved Goddard up ahead of Hawkinson. I think Goddard moves up to about tight end 5 this week, to be completely honest with you. I mean, we saw Goddard earlier in the season with no A.J. Brown, and Dallas Goedert absolutely crushed. Now, obviously, no Devonta Smith was there for a game, but it was also no A.J. Brown. In that game, Dallas Goedert was the tight end 1 in fantasy. But again, probably don't expect that to be 100% locked in. I probably would move A.J. Brown from 3 to... It honestly doesn't really matter with A.J. Brown. You start the dude regardless. Jalen Hurts, we already had ranked to QB3. I'm probably not updating this with Hurts. Now, going through and looking at the rest of these updates. Sam Laporta not listed on the injury report for week 12, so Laporta's good to go. We already knew that was going to be the case. Malik Neighbors intends on playing. You probably have no Alexander Madison and Zamir White. Darius Slayton not listed on the injury report. Don't care. DeAndre Swift said he's going to be playing week 12. I mean, obviously Swift missed practice on Wednesday, practice on Thursday. I picked up Roshan just in case, but I'm planning on playing Swift because I'm freaking screwed this week. Keenan Allen expects to play week 12 as well. Dear God. Down the wrong pipe. Oh, I apologize for that. But Pacheco won't play week 12 either. So I was all excited about Pacheco this week. I was thinking he had a shot for him to come back, but very much understandable for the Chiefs to slow roll him. Very much understandable for them to say, well, you know what? There's no way in hell we're losing to Carolina Panthers. We're playing for a Super Bowl. So why would they go through and why would they rush Pacheco back in? So honestly, I probably move Kareem Hunt up to about RB12, which sucks because this week I have to play this dude. But this is a game with a massive spread, of course. I mean, right now you have a spread in this game of about 10.5 points. I mean, the Chiefs project as the 5th highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. They should be able to run the ball over and over again. And no, Pacheco means Hunt is going to be phenomenal. Spears ruled out for week 12. So let me just confirm that we have Spears at the very bottom. We do. And looking at Pollard, I think I'd move Pollard ahead of Javonte. Honestly, y'all are going to hate me for doing this, but I'd probably move him ahead of Hubbard, Rachaad White. Every game that you've had no Spears in Tennessee, you actually have had Pollard with 80+% of the snaps. So I'd probably move Pollard up to about RB20 here. Now, obviously, coaching staff coming out in Carolina saying, hey, Chuba Hubbard's our starter, with Jonathan Brooks coming back in, which was the expectations. Now, obviously, Daniel Jones gets cuts and Jonathan Brooks is playing. I don't necessarily know if we have to talk about that any more than we have. Y'all already hate me for it, but we're not ranking Chuba Hubbard as some must-start running back by any means. It's a really tough matchup. While we expect Hubbard to be the starter, you can look at our rankings. We have Brooks down here at RB31. I would say you're probably in a situation in which you need to be a little bit hesitant to play committee running back, one of the worst offenses in the league. Now, going through, Daniel Jones got cut by the Giants. So you would think that a team like the Cowboys, if this was Madden, right, you just go ahead and you pick up Daniel Jones immediately. I think we can be in agreement. I think the Cowboys understand as well that Daniel Jones is better than Cooper Rush. But if you just think about it from a real life perspective, you bring in Daniel Jones, then all of a sudden, if Daniel Jones plays well, what situation does that put you in? No matter what, you're in a spot where Dak Prescott's your starting quarterback for next season. You have no shot to contend at all this year. So I know a lot of people would look at Daniel Jones getting released and scream oh my gosh, Cowboys, Cowboys, Cowboys. But it's the teams that desperately need a quarterback to the point where Daniel Jones would be an upgrade. None of them are contending. Maybe if you're the New York Jets, you bring in Daniel Jones to potentially play in 2025, but there's nobody that's signing Daniel Jones in a multi-year deal at this point. It's the situation that you had, say, with Baker Mayfield and the Rams a couple years back. Obviously, you bring in Baker and he kind of gets that launch pad with the Rams. But in reality, it doesn't really do much because you can only sign him to a 1-year deal. You're not really going to go through and sign Daniel Jones to a 3-year deal if you're the Jets. If he plays well, then, if you're the Jets, he's not going to see the field. So no team is bringing him in for 2025 right now. No team that needs him is a contender. So it kind of makes sense that nobody jumps to get Daniel Jones right away. So Broncos Chargers been flexed Thursday Night Football. Don't care. And I think that should be it for all the injury updates that we have today. But again, just freaking sucks for me where your boy had to go through and pick up Matthew Stafford to play. I'd moved Jalen Waddle into our starting lineup and Devonta Smith out of it. Bye weeks are hell. Injuries are hell. Week 12 is currently hell. But we're going to do our best to go through and try to answer as many questions as possible. I understand that there are probably a decent amount of people that are in a really tough situation that need some help here, like I do, but it is what it is. We're going to try to get through it together, and hopefully we can to the best of our abilities. But At least my team's not looking too hot right now. Now, let's go ahead and let's move this over. First question that we have is coming out from JRB. Says, hey, Mason, need some help on who to start. I'm on a 3-game win streak. I want to keep it going. Thank you. No, thank you, my guys. Super excited to go through and check this out. So going ahead and looking at this at wide receiver, we have Flowers, Terry, Evans, Jawan Jennings. So you're in a spot where you can't really look at Jennings anymore in my mind based off the decision, or not the decision, based off the fact that Brock Purdy's not playing. So it's really between Evans, Terry. I'm not considering Flowers here either. With Mike Evans, I would rather have him rest of season. You're going to get the extra game played. While at the same time, with no Godwin, I'm really confident in the passing volume you're going to have in this offense. I think Evans has a very high percentage of it. Now, of course, this week in particular, it's Evans' first week back. Maybe you play it safe and go Terry. I still probably go with Mike Evans just because I think you have an insane target share here. And then going down to what we have with the flex spots, I think we're going to go Terry McLaurin over the running backs. And I think we go with Brian Robinson as well. Obviously, Robinson, you're not going to have a crazy workload when it comes to the usage as a receiver. You are a little more touchdown or bust, but it's a really good spot where you're like a 10-point favorite. So presumably, if the touchdown's ever going to be there, it would be like this week. Now, our next question coming out from just the two of us. This is a trade question here, where we're sending Kyron and Downs for Breece and Debo. So Kyron to Breece, lateral move. I'd prefer Kyron because you're getting the extra game. Downs to Debo, I was viewing as a decent little upgrade until you had the Brock Purdy injury, because it's not like Purdy is guaranteed to be back this next week either. So for me, I actually probably go with the Kyron side here because I don't necessarily know if Downs to Debo is a large enough upgrade to justify it. And again, I think from a points per game perspective, rest of season, you can make a really strong argument for Kyron and Breece being similar. But I do think you have to prefer Kyron given the fact that you are getting the extra game played. And yes, I know that we need to go through and rank Amir Abdullah. I will add Amir Abdullah to the rankings, and I'll show y'all with the injury live update next week. I apologize. I'll get Amir Abdullah in there for y'all. But let's go ahead and let's get to our next question. This one coming out from Samir. Always happy to see you. Wide receiver, we are locking in Evans. We're most likely going with Flowers as well. Should be the highest scoring game of the week, or at least that's what sportsbooks are currently saying. You have an over-under of about 51 points there between the Chargers and Ravens. And then going over to the flex, it's really going to be down between DJ Moore as well as Bucky Irving. With Bucky, the issue is the size has really limited him from expanding his role past a certain point. If the touchdown's there, he's going to be fine, of course. But if the touchdown's not there, you're in a tough spot where Rachaad White's going to take a lot of the receiving usage. So full PPR format, I probably go DJ Moore. They are very, very close for me, though. I wouldn't fault you at all if you wanted to go Bucky. But I think you have a little more hope with the change with the offensive coordinator here in Chicago. Now, going over to our next question is coming out from Junior Dayton. Says, is this trade bad enough to end the league over? This is a dynasty one quarterback trade where you have 2 first-round picks swapped. Somebody sends Burrow for Worthy and Kincaid. I'd probably rather have the Burrow side, but nothing even remotely close to in the league over. If this was a super flex dynasty league, then obviously maybe you can have that conversation. But in a one quarterback dynasty league, I think it's relatively fair. Unless I'm losing my mind. But in a one quarterback dynasty league, I think you can make an argument for either side depending on what your roster is. Now, McQueen coming out with our next question. Here, start, sit. We don't have the quarterback to choose from. I'm sorry, my friend. Going down to the flex, we have Leggett with Adam Thielen, good to go. We have Demario Douglas. We have Wan'Dale Robinson. We have Romeo Doubs. I'm actually probably going to go Dobbs here and send up a prayer that we get a touchdown in Green Bay. Obviously, the target volume's not consistent for any of the Green Bay receivers just because of how many options they have in this offense. Things are naturally going to get spread around. But my thing is, Leggett is possibly the wide receiver 2 in a bad matchup in one of the worst offenses in the league. Wan'Dale Robinson is arguably the wide receiver 2 in one of the worst offenses in the league. They're really spreading the ball around a ton in New England, similar to what they're doing in Green Bay, but the passing volume is going to be a lot lessened with Drake May in comparison to Jordan Love. So I think I'd rather go with Romeo Doubs. Not an easy call, and I will say you probably move the Packers receivers down just a bit in the rankings based off the fact that you have a lower game environment. Honestly, I think we probably have to move Jacobs up if we really think about the impact that you have with no Purdy. So where the hell do we have Jacobs? We have Jacobs RB9 in the rankings. Yeah, spread of like 9 points. I think you actually move Jacobs ahead of Walker here, because they probably just run the ball consistently. And I think we maybe slide down the Packers receivers a bit, just given the game environment. And we forgot to move Smith down to the very bottom. I apologize. Let's do that real quick. But yeah, let's move Smith to the bottom. I'd probably move Reed behind Flowers. At this point, I'd probably move him behind Hopkins. And then going over to what we have with the other Packers receivers. Then you go Quentin Johnston. The thing is, you got to move Pearsall down. Things are just ugly right now. Things are just freaking ugly. I mean, it was already tough because of the amount of bye weeks that you had this week. But now you sprinkle on these injuries as well. It just makes it damn near impossible. Now, Kavig says, I have Chase Brown, Breece Hall, and Justin Jefferson. Going from Montgomery to CMC, very easily, give me CMC. Cup to Shakir. I mean, if you have Brown, Breece, and Jefferson, where we have plenty of depth, where we can go ahead and we can afford to just use CMC as an elite flex option. Yeah, I'd be willing to go through and make this 2-for-1 deal. My only hesitation is this is that 14-team format. So in a 14-team league, obviously depth's going to be a little bit tougher to come by. But even unless maybe if you have a better sense of the true impact of this Purdy injury. Because if you expect Purdy to be missing a considerable amount of time here, obviously you move that down dramatically. Matthew says Packers are favored by 5.5, not 8, ? I think you're looking at the wrong source. I don't know if you're looking at something post Purdy injury. I'll pull it up again. I'll pull up a different resource here. But last I checked, it looked like there was a massive spread on the Niners game post. You're right. I'm actually seeing the spread as 5.5 now. So, yeah, you're 100% right. Spread is 5.5 on that game. Still, you'd have the Packers heavily favored. But spread is lower than what you have with like the Houston game, Lions game. There are a bunch of large spreads this week. The only games with 3-point or fewer spreads are the Chargers, Rams, Seahawks, and Bears. But JB coming out with our next question. Here, this is a Dynasty Superflex 10-team Start 9 league. Obviously, Dynasty League hunt is an absolute zero once we get to the offseason. We're effectively trading away 2 firsts, Zay Flowers for CeeDee Lamb. For me, I just don't particularly see what this accomplishes, to be honest. Specifically for your league settings, where both first-round picks are guaranteed to be inside the top 10. There's super flex, so we should see value pushed down with quarterbacks being propped up. Like, I understand going through and making a play for one of the elite receivers is going to help you contend this season, but my thing is, like, Lamb's more exciting in the long term than he is this year. If you have a long-term build, wouldn't we prefer having the flexibility with the assets that are guaranteed to increase in value? And if you're making this trade to contend, why the hell are we giving up Kareem Hunt to a rebuilder? So I just don't necessarily see where the value add is. Now, Hayes Solinger says, rough week with the bye. Would love some help. God bless. Much love, my friend. We'll be excited to check this out. I think you go Andrews here over Tucker Kraft. Should be a higher scoring game environment. Obviously, both tight ends have been very touchdown or bust so far this season. But maybe you're a little bit more excited about the passing volume that you have in Baltimore than you are in Green Bay at this point. Going down to the flex, we have no Kamara. We have no ETN. We have no Devonta Smith. We have no Drake London. Freaking brutal. We're going to go Rome Odunze, who's been seeing 7-8 targets a game since after the bye. Now, obviously, the issue that you have with this is it's been a bad offense, but maybe changing offense coordinator, give Chicago some life. And then the other flex slot that we're looking at, really the only options you could consider here are going to be Tucker Kraft, Romeo Doubs, and Kayshon Boutte, I believe. I think we're going to go with Romeo Doubs, send up a prayer that a touchdown's there. Obviously, that's really all that you're doing. But it is a good offense. It's an offense that probably can run the ball a ton. But we have seen the spike weeks from Romeo Doubs earlier this season. He's still seeing routes. Now, Rod J coming out with our next question. Here, this is a Superflex Dynasty League. Quarterback 2, we're definitely going to go with Tua. Right now, I believe the Dolphins project out to be the third highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. Going down to the 2 flex spots, we currently have Flowers and Ramondre in them. If you were to make a pivot, the best option on our bench at the moment maybe is Javonte Williams. Yeah, scrolling through here, the best option would be Javonte. And I wouldn't play Javonte over Flowers or Ramondre. Obviously, it's a really good matchup for the Denver running backs. And while Javonte did dominate the volume this past week, I don't want to say he dominated the volume. He dominated the fantasy points this past week. He did still only see like 14 total opportunities. So I do think that you're still a little concerned about Javonte maybe not being everything here in Denver, even if Estime is obviously a lot less than he was promised to be. So still probably bench Javonte out of this grouping, but it is what it is. Ray Charles says, my wife, Borat voice, is in a tough spot this week with buys. Who's your running back 2 in flex spots? Appreciate you, and hopefully you appreciate the pathetic attempt to hit you with the my wife. But anyway, looking at what we have here, running back, we have no Bijan. This is a really tough spot. I think a lot of people would probably go with Cam Akers here. Obviously, Cam Akers gets the receiving touchdown this past week. But what I'm a little bit concerned about, one, it's a tougher matchup in general for the Minnesota running backs. And 2, at the same time, if you are looking at the fact that this is a spot where you have another week for Aaron Jones to get fully healthy, where he did get banged up 2 weeks ago. And I think maybe that's a small explanation you can have for the lowered volume that you had for Aaron Jones in the expanded role with Akers. Again, it's a really good matchup for the Denver backs. Well, clearly Estime is not everything that he was promised to be. I don't know. You did get 3 targets, which is maybe a little bit encouraging. Then we go with Estime. And then down in the 2 flex spots, we have no London. We have no Kincaid. Pearsall looks even less interesting now that you have no Purdy. I think you're stuck playing Romeo Doubs here in one of these slots. And in the other, you're looking at like Akers or Will Dissly or Ricky Pearsall, I guess. Let me see what the underdog projections are here, to be completely honest with you. I'm sorry. These options are just so gross. Pearsall gives you a goose egg last week with Brock Purdy. Now, with no Brock Purdy, realistically speaking, I don't know what you can expect here. There's no world in which I want to be playing a backup running back or a tight end in the flex. So let's go through and let's look at this. Dissly. Higher, lower, 41.5 receiving yards. We're probably going Disley. As you compare this to Akers, Akers won't have the same receiving usage, and his touchdown odds are way lower. And then Pearsall, it's higher, lower, 18.5 receiving yards. Yeah, there's no way in hell you can go with Pearsall. I do think you end up probably going with the tight end here in the other flex. Obviously, hate playing a tight end in the flex spot. I would look to avoid it any chance that you have. But I don't know if this is one of those spots where we can't avoid. Now, next question coming out from Jeremy. It says, with Purdy, do we play Jennings or Rico? Are there any other options, really? No, you have no Garrett Wilson. I think you go Dowdle. Both players should be in bad offenses. I would say that the Niners offense will probably be better than the Cowboys. Right now, you'd have the Niners projected, I believe, to score 1.5 more than Dallas this week if you're looking at sports books. You have a spread of like 10.5 points on this game here between the Cowboys and the Commanders. So obviously you don't want to play a running back in that environment. But you can get some checkdowns going. And not only can you see some of the checkdowns going for Rico Dowdle, but you have a baseline floor with the touches. So if it was me, I would go Dowdle. But obviously not excited about either one given the context of the offenses. But Manifest Destiny coming out with a massive dono. Thank you so much, my guy. Let me hook you up with another free start set question, just in case you have anything else you want to send my way maybe next week. It says, hey, Mason, having a hard time deciding on who to start considering injuries and the bye. All right, so we have no Brees. I think Amir Abdullah, Rico Dowdle, very close. I probably go with Dowdle because it's not like we can say with Amir Abdullah, oh, okay, he's going to get usage and he's in a better situation or a better offense than what you have with Dowdle. No, the Raiders are just as much as a dumpster fire, and they have a tough matchup here going up against Denver. Going down to the flex spots, I would be taking Roma Dunze, and honestly, between Amir Abdullah and Jennings, it's close. Can I see what we have with the underdog picks? Jennings currently is higher, lower, 52.5 receiving yards. It's honestly is much higher than I was expecting. And Amir Abdullah is currently higher, lower, 52.5 total yards, but obviously the receiving will be less, which would point you in the direction of Jawan Jennings. Obviously, you're less excited about it because the offense is going to be bad. But again, like, I don't think we can justify playing Amir Abdullah because the other option we're looking at is in a bad offensive situation. Amir Abdullah is not only in a garbage offense, but he does have a very bad matchup as well. So naturally, I do think it's a tough spot to get excited about him. Now, Prowl's coming out with our next question. So starts at here, quarterback. We are looking at Kyler versus Herbert. Herbert has a great matchup, but if it's a 4-point passing touchdown format, I'm still just going to go with the guy that has the rushing upside in Kyler Murray. Now, obviously, if it's a 6-point passing touchdown format, then you can make an argument for the player that should be in the highest scoring game environment with Herbert. They'll have the passing volume. And then going over to the flex, we have Chuba Hubbard, Rachaad White, Josh Downs really to choose from. If I'm looking at the running backs, I know 99% of people here are going to be spamming that they want to go with Hubbard. I do think that's pretty close, however, because if you look at the difference with how the offenses project, right now you do see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers projecting out about 8 higher points than what you have in Carolina. I think both running backs are in pseudo committees. I would imagine that Bucky takes more from Rachaad White than Brooks takes from Chuba this week in particular. But Rachaad White will probably have more receiving usage than Chuba Hubbard. And more importantly, Rachaad White will be in a much better offense in a much better matchup. So I personally probably go with Rachaad White in this flex spot. I'll say, of course, that I completely understand why everybody else wants to go Chuba Hubbard. Last time we saw Hubbard play, the man had 30 opportunities. And if Hubbard comes anything close to that, he is just going to run laps around Rachaad White, clearly. But my thing is, I don't know if you get to that same usage mark once we get back in or get in for the first time Jonathan Brooks into this offense. Now, Todd Gillen says dropping Pat for DJ Moore off the waiver wire, so he is also a flex option. Are you trolling me? These are how bad our wide receivers are? We still are stuck with Kittle, even with the injury to Purdy. And yeah, you freaking have to, you go DeAndre Hopkins, Jordan Addison, you have to play DJ Moore down here in the flex. I mean, Eckler has 11 targets last week, so maybe want to make an argument, oh, Eckler is now viable. But the thing is, if you remove every other game if you remove every game that Brian Robinson missed and just look at the games that Brian Robinson played with Eckler, Eckler didn't come close to that kind of receiving volume. So I think it really was an outlier of what we saw last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it was mainly due to the scheme that you saw up there. So for me, I would just pick up DJ Moore and play him in the flex. It's a tough defense to go up against Minnesota, but Minnesota also has allowed a considerable amount of points to opposing wide receivers. Gavin, always happy to see you, my friend, says, the Nico for Montgomery Higgins deal fell through. Got this deal done. Needed a running back. What are your thoughts? Thanks, my son. I think it's a great deal. I think Brees versus CeeDee Lamb would be a conversation, and I'd probably slightly prefer Lamb with Dak Prescott fully healthy. But with Dak injured, and with the Cowboys offense being even much worse than what you have in New York, I think it's a very easy spot to take Brees Hall. Brees Hall has one game this season with fewer than 4 targets. You still have the big play upside. I'm assuming maybe the only reason that anybody would make this deal, anybody would send you Brees Hall for CeeDee Lamb, is if they're like in a must-win spot and they can't afford to wait for Brees Hall to get through the bye. Where in that environment, then obviously maybe they just want to go through and they want the extra game played. But yeah, long term, give me Brees, especially with the schedule. Hellboy Jordan, always happy to see you, my guy. Here, quarterback, we are choosing between Stroud, A-Rich, Geno, Lamar. Obviously, we go Lamar, even a tough matchup. Running back, we lock in CMC and Kyron, even with the environment that you should have with no Purdy. Wide receiver, we go Nico Collins, hoping that he plays more than 50% of the snaps this week. We lock in Puka Nacua, despite it being a tough matchup against Philly. And then going down to the flex, we're looking at Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mike Evans being the main options. For me, if we knew Evans was 100%, I think Evans would be the very easy call here. I think I still end up going with Mike Evans because looking at how strong your roster is, I do think that you're in a spot where you just have a lot of, I don't know, you have a lot of security. We have to have the best team in this league. It's not, I don't even think it's remotely close either. If you didn't want to go with Evans, I think the option you'd pivot over to would be Aaron Jones instead. Now, Parrish coming out with our start set question. Quarterback, we are going to go ahead and take Kyler over Bo. Running back, we go Pollard over Hubbard with Brooks playing and Spears not. Wide receiver, oh, dear God. Are we playing Leggett? You should have a ton of pass attempts here in Carolina. Now, obviously, it's a tough matchup regardless, so I'm not excited about it. But I'm telling you right now, there's no world I ever tell anybody to play Nick Westbrook-Akeen. Pearsall's in just bad of an offense with less volume, and then we just go ahead and play Brock Bowers at tight end. I'd probably rather play Jonnu Smith than any of these receivers, though. Now, Tough Tony coming out says, we have Puka, Wilson, Higgins already. Do we accept? Smith injured, Debo with an injured quarterback, Kenneth Walker being the clear best player in this deal. If you already have Puka, Wilson, Higgins, I don't really see what the purpose of this is. Trust me, any chance you get to get out of Tank Dell, I'm game for. Not a Tank Dell fan. Now, with that being said, we're trading for 2 distressed assets. And we're not particularly getting a discount either, where we are the ones giving the best player in the deal. So, yeah, I would rather just go ahead, and I would rather just hold on to Kenneth Walker. Now, DeClaw coming out with our next question says, hey, Mason, just have one question. Who should we start my flex with London out? Thank you, bro. No, thank you, my guy. Are you're troll? You're flexing on us here. We have Gibbs in the flex spot currently. So really the only pivot you could make is taking Calvin Ridley out of wide receiver 2. This is an insane team. If you wanted to take Ridley out in favor of like DJ Moore, you could consider it. I would rather have Ridley given the guaranteed I don't know. Given the guaranteed target volume that you have, whereas if you're looking at DJ Moore, you are still having to compete with Roma Dunze. You are still having to compete with Keenan Allen. So I think we leave this as is. Obviously, there's no world in which we don't play Jahmyr Gibbs in this flex. And yeah, I do think that you're sitting in a phenomenal spot in general. But let's move this over to our next question coming out from I Duckham. Here we need 2 running backs. We're looking at Hunt as a locked and loaded start with no Pacheco. Brian Robinson, Aaron Jones will be close for us. With the Commanders being 10.5-point favorites, I think that they should be able to just run the ball consistently. I think we go Brian Robinson. I'm going to go Evans at receiver. And then I will go Aaron Jones down in the flex, hoping that being another week removed from the injury, we see less Cam Akers this week than we had a week ago, but obviously that will be something to monitor. But I think we probably will call it here. I swallowed water down the wrong pipe right at the start of the live stream and have not recovered since. But I really do appreciate y'all and really hope that you don't have to deal with all the freaking injuries like my team does. And hopefully I'm able to overcome it regardless. But obviously I'll be live streaming tomorrow, giving all the last minute injury updates around lunchtime, maybe like 3-ish. And then we'll be live streaming late tomorrow night answering all your questions. But good luck. Really do appreciate you. And I really do thank you for hanging out with me tonight.